From the topmost floor of the Li Corporation headquarters, Li Wei gazed out at the city, his silver eyes reflecting the distant glow. It was a city he had fought for, a legacy he had protected, alone. His life had become an endless cycle of decisions, deals, and lonely victories. The soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Before he could answer, the door opened and his secretary stepped in. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "Li Feng is here." At the name, Li Wei's heart stirred with memories of the past. Li Feng was born on a stormy autumn night. Outside his father's study, young Li Wei was told, "You have a brother now. Take care of him." Li Wei nodded, though his young heart was heavy. His mother's death still lingered, and his father's remarriage had created a rift he didn't know how to bridge. When he first saw Li Feng, the baby was crying loudly, red-faced and vulnerable. "He's noisy," Li Wei muttered. "All babies are," the nanny said. "He'll quiet down when he feels safe." Safe. The word stayed with him. As years passed, Li Wei remained distant. Their father and stepmother doted on Li Feng, while Li Wei watched from the shadows, silently protective. At 4, Li Feng followed him everywhere, seeking attention. Li Wei offered little, but when Li Feng scraped his knee or faced scolding, Li Wei quietly stepped in to help. As Li Feng grew older, his admiration for Li Wei never wavered. But Li Wei, burdened by responsibilities, kept his distance. "Wei, can we play outside?" a 7-year-old Li Feng asked. "I'm busy," Li Wei replied. "You don't care about me," Li Feng shouted, storming off. From that day, he stopped asking. Li Wei watched the growing gap between them, guilt gnawing at him, but he didn't know how to bridge it. That was their past. Li Wei's grip tightened on his glass. "Li Feng?" he repeated, voice calm despite the storm inside. "Send him in." The door opened, revealing a tall, poised man. Li Feng. The boy was gone, replaced by someone with sharp features and silver eyes mirroring Li Wei's own. "Li Wei," Li Feng said, voice steady and cold. "I want to work here." Li Wei leaned back, amused. "Work here? Why? This is my family's company too," Li Feng snapped. "I want my place." Li Wei's smile was faint, unreadable. "And what makes you think I'll let you?" Li Feng's gaze didn't waver. "Because you owe me. For father. For mother. For everything." Li Wei's smile faltered briefly before hardening. "Fine. Start Monday, but don't expect favors." As Li Feng left, Li Wei leaned back, exhaling slowly. His brother was back, but the distance between them felt icy. Li Feng's first weeks were a blur of meetings, reports, and late nights. His sharp mind and relentless drive impressed everyone. But beneath his polished exterior, he worked toward a single goal, to dismantle everything Li Wei had built. Li Wei watched quietly, noting how Li Feng commanded attention, a charisma that echoed their father's. One evening, Li Wei told his secretary, "Give Li Feng the best team for the upcoming project." "Should I inform him?" she asked. "No," Li Wei replied firmly. "He doesn't need to know." Days later, Li Feng burst into Li Wei's office, holding a file. "Why did you reassign the project lead?" Li Wei looked up, calm. "I thought you'd do better." "Stop pretending like you're helping me," Li Feng snapped. Li Wei leaned back. "I gave you the role because you're capable. If you see ulterior motives, that's on you." Li Feng hesitated, then left in silence, his mind racing. Why would Li Wei support him? Guilt? Or something else? Months later, Li Feng's birthday arrived. He had no plans to celebrate, but a formal invitation from Li Wei to the family estate changed his mind. The house, a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of Shanghai, was quiet when he arrived. The dining hall was set for 2, the space eerily empty. Li Wei was already seated, a glass of wine in hand. "You're late," Li Wei remarked, his tone neutral. Li Feng sat down without responding. The meal was exquisite but silent, tension hanging in the air. After dessert, Li Wei slid a small envelope across the table. "What's this?" Li Feng asked suspiciously. "Your gift," Li Wei said simply. Inside was the deed to 20% of the company shares. Li Feng's hands trembled as he read the document. "Why would you do this?" he demanded, his voice rising. Li Wei took a sip of wine, his expression unreadable. "Because you are family," Li Feng clenched his fists. "You think this makes up for everything?" Li Wei's gaze softened, but he said nothing. His silence only fueled Li Feng's anger. Li Feng worked late into the night, papers scattered across his desk. His silver eyes burned with determination as his plan neared completion. With the shareholders on his side and control of key company shares, only the final step remained. The next day, he entered the boardroom confidently. The directors were seated, their expressions cautious. At the head of the table sat Li Wei, calm and unreadable. "Let's begin," Li Feng said, his voice steady. A director spoke. "Mr. Li Feng has called this meeting to address company leadership." Li Wei's gaze sharpened. "Leadership?" he echoed. "Go on." Li Feng didn't flinch. "It's time for change. Under your leadership, the company has stagnated. We need new vision. I'm ready to take us forward." Murmurs spread. Li Wei leaned back. "And you think you're the one for the job?" "Yes," Li Feng replied firmly. The board reviewed his proposals, finding them compelling. With majority support, a vote was called. By the end, Li Wei was no longer CEO. Li Feng watched as Li Wei calmly gathered his things. "Thank you for your service," Li Feng said, his tone measured. "I'll take it from here." Li Wei paused briefly at the door, nodded, and left without a word. The room fell silent. Gripping the table, Li Feng realized his victory felt strangely hollow. That evening, Li Feng returned to the family estate and found the study lights on. Inside, Li Wei sat at the oak desk, surrounded by old documents. "You're here," Li Feng said sharply. Li Wei didn't look up. "Where else would I be?" Frustration flared. "Why didn't you fight back? You could have stopped this." Li Wei set his pen down, his silver eyes weary. "Did you want to fight?" "I wanted you to care," Li Feng snapped, "to show this company mattered to you." Li Wei stood, his presence imposing. "You think I don't care? I've cared for the company, for this family, for you. But caring doesn't mean clinging to power." Li Feng laughed bitterly. "You're just playing the martyr." Li Wei's gaze hardened. "Believe what you want. You've already decided I'm the villain." "You are," Li Feng shouted. "You let father die, you destroyed mother, and now you pretend you're above it all." Li Wei's composure cracked. "You think I wanted any of this? I've sacrificed more than you'll ever know." "Sacrifice?" Li Feng scoffed. "You call exiling mother and stealing this company sacrificing?" "I stole nothing," Li Wei said firmly. "I built this while you were gone. And as for mothers," he paused, "you don't know the truth." "Then tell me," Li Feng demanded. Li Wei stayed silent. Li Feng stormed out, slamming the door. Alone in the study, Li Wei sifted through old photographs, his father's smiling face staring back. "Did I fail him?" he whispered. The room offered no answer. For the first time, he allowed himself to grieve, not for his father or his position, but for the brother he couldn't reach. Li Feng sat in his lavish new office, his gaze fixed on the Shanghai skyline. The city sprawled beneath him, a testament to the empire he had finally claimed. Yet, the victory felt hollow. Every time he passed through the hallways of Li Corporation, he could feel the echoes of Li Wei's presence. The staff still spoke of him in hushed tones, their respect for him evident in every word. It was infuriating. He shoved the thought aside and turned his attention to the files on his desk. The audit reports had been piling up since he took over, each one uncovering more secrets about the company's operations under Li Wei's tenure. He had tasked his assistant with digging into every detail, determined to find something, anything to justify his hatred. "Sir, here's the file you requested," his assistant said, entering the room and placing a thick folder on his desk. Li Feng opened it, his silver eyes scanning the documents. It was a compilation of financial statements, emails, and correspondence between Li Wei and the senior board members over the past decade. At first, everything seemed above board. Li Wei had always been meticulous. But then something caught his attention, a series of payments labeled as emergency contingency funds. The amounts were staggering, and the recipients were vague entities or individuals with no clear ties to the company. "What's this?" Li Feng asked, frowning. His assistant hesitated. "Those payments were made during the time your mother, Madame Song, was still part of the family. It seems they were used to counteract her attempts to siphon company funds into her personal accounts." Li Feng's brow furrowed. "What?" His assistant nodded. It appears your mother had been embezzling money for years. Mr. Li Wei took measures to stop her without involving the authorities, likely to avoid a scandal. Li Feng leaned back in his chair, the weight of the revelation sinking in. He had known his mother wasn't a saint, but to think she had been stealing from the company? "Keep digging," he said, his voice strained. "I want every detail." The next few weeks were a blur of discovery. Li Feng pored over old records, personal correspondence, and testimonies from former employees. The picture that emerged was not one of Li Wei as the villain, but of a man who had fought tirelessly to protect the family's legacy. He learned that their father's death had not been an accident. The files revealed correspondence suggesting that his mother had orchestrated the series of events that led to their father's demise, her ambition driving her to take over the company. Li Wei had uncovered her plot and acted swiftly, removing her from the family and the company to protect them both. Late one night, Li Feng sat alone in his study at the family estate. The incriminating documents spread before him. His hands trembled as he held an old letter, written in his father's handwriting. "Wei, my son, take care of your brother. Protect him from the shadows of this world. You are stronger than you think, and I trust you to do what is right." Li Feng's chest tightened. His father had trusted Li Wei, not just with the company but with him. And what had he done? He had turned that trust into hatred. Unable to bear the guilt, Li Feng sought out an old family friend, Mr. Zhou, who had been their father's confidant and Li Wei's mentor. "I need to know," Li Feng said, sitting across from the elderly man in his modest home. "Did my mother... was she really responsible for my father's death?" Mr. Zhou sighed deeply, his expression heavy with sorrow. "Your mother loved power more than she loved your father. It was Li Wei who discovered her plans and stopped her. If it weren't for him, the company would have fallen apart." Li Feng clenched his fists. "Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because he didn't want you to hate her," Mr. Zhou said softly. "He wanted to protect you, even if it meant becoming the villain in your eyes." The words hit Li Feng like a blow. He had spent years hating the wrong person, blind to the sacrifices Li Wei had made. It was raining heavily when Li Feng returned to the family estate. He found Li Wei in the study, sitting at the desk where their father once worked. Papers were scattered around him, but his attention was fixed on a small photograph in his hands. "Why didn't you tell me?" Li Feng asked, his voice shaking. Li Wei looked up, his silver eyes calm but tired. "What good would it have done?" "You let me hate you," Li Feng said, stepping closer. "You let me believe you were the villain. All this time..." Li Wei set the photograph down and stood. "You had every right to hate me. I've made mistakes, Feng, more than you'll ever know." "That's not an excuse," Li Feng shouted. "You could have told me the truth. You could have stopped me from becoming this what?" Li Wei interrupted, his voice rising for the first time. "This man who took everything from me? The man who broke my trust and cast me aside?" Li Feng flinched, the words cutting deeper than he expected. "I didn't know." "No," Li Wei said, his voice softening. "You didn't. And I didn't stop you because I thought it was what you needed. You needed to hate me to grow strong, to take what you believed was yours." Tears blurred Li Feng's vision. "I didn't want this, Li Wei. I didn't want to hurt you." Li Wei stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "Then what did you want, Feng?" Li Feng looked away, his voice trembling. "I wanted you to care, to see me, to treat me like your brother." Li Wei sighed, the weight of years of silence pressing down on him. "I've always cared, Feng. I just didn't know how to show it." The words broke something in Li Feng. He sank to his knees, his tears falling freely. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for everything." Li Wei hesitated for a moment before kneeling in front of him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We've both made mistakes," he said softly, "but it's not too late." The days that followed were awkward and tentative. Li Feng showed up at the estate unannounced, often with little excuse. Sometimes he brought food from Li Wei's favorite restaurants. Other times he simply wandered into the study, pretending to need advice on business matters. "You can't keep barging in here," Li Wei said one evening. Though his tone lacked the usual sharpness, he glanced at the takeout containers Li Feng had placed on the desk. "What is this?" "Dinner," Li Feng said nonchalantly, opening the boxes. "You eat like a robot. Someone needs to make sure you don't die from malnutrition." Li Wei rolled his eyes but didn't argue. They ate in silence, the quiet surprisingly comfortable. As the weeks passed, Li Wei began to anticipate these visits, though he never admitted it aloud. One evening, as they sat on the balcony overlooking the garden, Li Feng broke the silence. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked, staring at the distant city lights. "Regret what?" Li Wei asked, sipping his tea. "Everything," Li Feng said softly. "The sacrifices, the lies, pushing me away." Li Wei was quiet for a long time before replying. "I regret not being honest with you. I regret letting you believe you weren't important to me." Li Feng's breath hitched and he turned to look at his brother. "You mean that?" Li Wei met his gaze, the usual coldness in his eyes replaced by something warmer, something vulnerable. "Yes." Their relationship shifted slowly, like ice melting under the first warmth of spring. Li Feng began to notice the small ways Li Wei showed care, leaving notes for him on the desk, asking if he'd gotten home safely, or making tea just the way he liked it. One afternoon, as they worked together in the study, Li Feng glanced over at Li Wei, who was absorbed in his notes. His silver eyes reflected the sunlight streaming through the window, and his usually tense expression was relaxed. For the first time, Li Feng felt the full force of his emotions, admiration, affection, and something deeper, something he hadn't let himself name before. "Li Wei," he said softly. Li Wei looked up, startled by the tenderness in his brother's voice. "What is it?" "Thank you," Li Feng said, his voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." Li Wei blinked, surprised. "You don't need to thank me." "But I do," Li Feng insisted, his cheeks flushing, "because I know how much you gave up for me. For us." Li Wei's gaze softened, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, as if drawn by an invisible thread, Li Feng reached out, his hand brushing against Li Wei's. The touch was hesitant, but it lingered. Li Wei didn't pull away. One night, as they sat on the rooftop garden under a blanket of stars, Li Feng worked up the courage to speak the words that had been burning in his chest. "Wei," he began, his voice unsteady. Li Wei turned to him, his expression curious but patient. "I think I've always—" Li Feng paused, searching for the right words. "I think I've always needed you, but not just as my brother." Li Wei's eyes widened, his usually stoic mask slipping for a moment. "Feng, I don't know when it started," Li Feng continued, his words tumbling out. "But it's always been you. And I don't care if it's wrong or impossible. I just need you to know." Li Wei stared at him, his silver eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, he reached out, cupping Li Feng's cheek with a tenderness that made Li Feng's breath catch. "It's not wrong," Li Wei said quietly. "It's us." Li Feng's heart pounded as Li Wei leaned closer, their foreheads touching. The tension that had built between them for years finally broke, and in that moment, nothing else mattered. Under the stars, their lips met for the first time, a kiss filled with all the pain, love, and longing they had both kept hidden. It wasn't just a beginning, it was a promise.